all these doing away with superstitions helped me, like not telling anyone that I was up for something because you're going to jinx it, which is, of course, preposterous. Nobody hires or doesn't hire you because you told your mom. Um, so I started telling everyone everything. I auditioned for this. I'll probably get it. you know, um, and and sort of owning how bad I was at it. I thought I spent a fair amount of time in my head, at least, and making a couple of calls to where I was going to sign up for classes at the Groundlings. That's the improv group that based out here in LA. That big Saturday Night Live feeder. So many great people who you love were Groundlings. Will Ferrell, Maya Rudolph, people like that. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be a performer like that, but it'll help me in auditions where it's pretty bad. I mean, it's this empty, sterile environment. It's a humiliating experience. My respect for actors, actually, that whole experience put me in such a great shape to be on TCM because my appreciation for actors went through the roof. Like any stereotype, anytime somebody stereotypes an actor, they're like, he or she only got this job because they're beautiful, handsome.
Welcome to the road to greatness. Get ready to be inspired and empowered to take your career to the next level. Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Carlin Kiefer, and welcome to the Road to Greatness, Season 2. All right, so this means we have more experts, more people who are great at what they do, willing to share their path with you. Hopefully, you'll be able to take something away, apply it to your own circumstances and sets, and help you get to your own great destination. One of the things that came out of Season 1, you may recall, is that every single interview talked about mental agility, emotional agility, and resilience. All three are necessary components to becoming actually great at what you do. So, what does that look like? Well, it's different for everyone. And that's why we're interviewing as many experts as we can find to be able to share their version with you. If something resonates with you, please click like. If you want to hear more, please hit subscribe. And if you feel like you know someone who could probably benefit from a few extra tips and tricks, share. And with that, we're going to go to the road to greatness. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to this week's episode of The Road to Greatness. And of all the guests I've had so far, and big names, no names, and everyone in between, I am most excited about this one because I am going to introduce all of you to the person who helped create my persona as Carlin Kiefer, as on-stage presenter, as workshop leader, as all of the things that anyone has ever commented about my delivery style. It is all because of today's guest, Ben Mankiewicz. And so if you don't know the name, but you should, he is currently primary face and voice of Turner Classic Movies. And Ben was my very first career mentor and arguably one of my two best. When we were in television at Channel 5 in Charleston. Ben, thanks very much for joining.
Well, it was very nice of you to say. I don't, I'm dubious of the impact that I had, but it's really nice to hear. And I'm glad you're doing well. I like, that role, which was still pretty new to being on the air myself. Although I've been sort of at the time when we were in Charleston together, I'd been like practicing for it my entire life. And I come from a family, I had a brother, older brother who did it. So I'm grateful that you're doing something that you care about and that you're getting good feedback on. So that's great.
Well, yeah, look at you being all modest and aw shucksy. So let's talk about, you said you come from a family where your brother is still reporter at Dateline, but also your whole family is in has been in either some form of media, communication, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and all the like. So tell me about just let's start where we always start, which is the career path. You have had multiple versions of public personalities. So walk me through how you ended up where you are now.
Well, when we were discussing this a little bit at a time, I don't really think of myself as having pivoted much, but you can make an argument that I've pivoted often. Like I just saw it sort of in a more direct through line because I changed I changed the direction of what I was going to talk about on television, but it was being still communicating, right? On TV and on the air. And if you break down what I am, like what my job is, I mean, I'm technically my main job. I do pieces for CBS Sunday Morning and a couple of podcasts, but mostly I'm the host of Turner Classic Movies. Everything good in my life has come from that. Everything good professionally has come from that. It's not even everything good professionally. I mean, I met my wife at the festival. We have a kid, so the whole family came from TCM. And but I would say what I am is a broadcaster. And I like
Fair.
that job. It's a job that's probably going away, right? That everything is narrowcasting. But if you came up in the era of local news, certainly in Charleston, you were casting to a pretty broad audience in Charleston there at Live 5 News. So my family is I suppose if your family's not famous at all, and I say my family's low key famous, you might think I'm shucksing it again. But I mean, like they were always sort of behind the scenes. We're not. I once when I came to Los Angeles when I was like 21 or 22, and I stayed with my cousin out here, and I got invited to a party by a cousin, a different cousin of mine, whose last name isn't Mankiewicz, but he's as much a Mankiewicz as I am. His mother was my father's sister. And he introduced me to the guy who threw the party. And this was like 1988. So I was 21. The guy put his hands together and bowed and said Hollywood royalty.
Wow.
And I thought like cool. Larry Spielberg is behind me, but he was talking about me. That's because my grandfather wrote Citizen Kane, was at times the highest paid screenwriter early in his career when he came out here. Highest paid screenwriter in Hollywood for a bit. I mean, that doesn't mean much if you're a screenwriter. And then the movie Mank is about my grandfather Herman, and he sort of hated the business that was making him rich. And so he spent all his money, gambled it all away, and gave it all away. He was very generous too. And then later had borrowed money from the same people to whom he had lent money.
Or given.
There's a famous story about Herman that if you needed $1,000 back when he had money, he'd always give you two, because he's like, here's the 1,000 you need, and then you got to have the 1,000 to get going, right? So, and then his younger brother, by almost the same gap that my brother and I have, about 12 years, was Joe Mankiewicz, and Joe Mankiewicz was much more successful. Herman always thought that because he was listening to his father, my great grandfather, who was clearly telling the kids that this popcorn entertainment for the masses is not a serious way to make a living. It's not what a serious person does. And it's funny, if you wrote plays, that was serious. If you wrote the great American novel, that was serious. If you were a theater critic, which my grandfather had been, that was serious. But these movies, that's embarrassing. My Uncle Joe used to say he may have thought the movies were embarrassing, but he sure liked the yacht that the movies bought.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah. So, so my grandfather sort of wrestled with that. Joe wrestled with it also, but managed to get through life with a great deal of success. He won 4 Oscars in 2 years for writing and directing All About Eve and Letter to Three Wives, in the other order, Letter to Three Wives first, and became one of the biggest writer-directors in Hollywood in the early part of the 1950s. And then his career also suffered a significant roadblock when he directed Cleopatra, which nearly bankrupted Fox, nearly put him out of business. Not really Joe's fault, actually, but nonetheless, he sort of was it was Joseph L. Mankiewicz's Cleopatra. He tried to get he gave him $1 million, and he tried to get his name taken off. Now, all of this said, we've talked a lot about money, which I seldom talk about, because when the movie Mank came out, and my brother and I were doing some promotion for it, David Fincher's film, even though we had nothing to do with it at all, but the Netflix people and Fincher were happy to have us talk about it. And one of the questions that get asked is, what's the biggest misconception about the Mankiewiczes? And my brother, without missing a beat, said that we're rich. Like, there's no, whatever. Joe, I think, had money. And so people in Joe's line, it may be fine. But I'm like, to my friends, I'm the most famous person they know that's hadn't inherited a dollar. But the political cachet that the name carries with some people is definitely, it has a value, no question.
All right, so we've heard about everybody else's success and where they all came from. Let's talk about you
Well,
and the
okay.
fact that what drives you. So we'll walk everybody through very quickly. You had a TV news stint and with local news, which we all know is super exciting. Note sarcasm here. But then also going into, at one point you were at TMZ, at another point, and I want to say, actually, I'm going to go there. Where did you go after TMZ?
Well, so they cross over. So the thing it is, I can't talk about my success without talking about my families because
Okay.
so that background is needed for people because what fuels me, if you're asking what fuels me, is to not be the first stupid one, right? The first failure. Like that's a big motivation. And my father, who was in politics and was the smartest person in the family, and the funniest, all those things, could have been a very rich screenwriter if he'd gone that route. But he heard John F. Kennedy's call to like ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Latin American director of the Peace Corps, beat the Nazis, then Latin American director of the Peace Corps after he was an entertainment lawyer, and Bobby Kennedy's press secretary, George McGovern's campaign manager, president of National Public Radio. When that's your father, you're like, what am I? I'm not gonna, wrote 4 books. Again, everyone smart called him all the time when I was growing up. And so I was just this sense of like, how do I follow in this guy's footsteps? I wanted to be a baseball broadcaster because it was my own thing, and I'm a big baseball fan, and I would have been good at it too. And it just made sense as the career that to me still makes the most sense for me is what I should have done. But right around the time that I would have had to have followed that path and gone to Pocatello, Idaho for a couple of years to do single A ball, and then hope to, go to Sacramento for a couple of years at AAA. We were in Charleston really when I had my last opportunity to go that route, and I thought sports is not serious enough. Like it was the same dumb thing that like my great grandfather told Herman, right? Like it wasn't serious enough, and
If the late great Stuart Scott were alive right now, he'd be just upset because I feel like there is an art form to that. So I just want to throw that out there.
Oh no, he's right. I was wrong. It was like a 18-month moment. When I could have I could have had the weekend sports job at Fox at CBS, but I would have like done some Fox News. I would have been Warren Pepper's #2, right? I mean, if I'd really pushed it, I probably could have gotten that. I did one segment. Warren, told me, I don't know, something, gave me some criticism. I can't remember.
We'll leave that one out.
But I didn't. Warren Pepper was the big sports guy at the station that Carlin and I worked at, and but I just thought like this is not serious, and I regret that I thought that. I don't regret the way my career worked out, but it was foolish to think that. So anyway, then I was in news, and then so everything was about sort of being at least not embarrassing to the family, and even though the family, I never even the California wing of the family, I didn't even really know. My father was it. That was it. And then my brother. And they never put any pressure on me at all. I decided to go, Dad, I'm going to Pocatello, Idaho. I'm going to be the #2 guy for the Pocatello Pilots. He would have been like, oh my God, it's fantastic. Let's drive out there. No question. He would have supported all that. But I didn't do that. So I stayed in Charleston, and and then, it was pretty clear that local news was bad and getting worse. And they didn't cover any of the things I cared about, which really just means politics. And they covered stories that I didn't care about either. They weren't even sort of suiting the community. Are your escalators safe? Come on. By the way, yes. Yeah, they're totally safe. Yeah.
Well, I do remember doing a live shot in the middle of Hurricane Floyd where I was standing on the roof of the building, and the Charleston Post and Courier wrote me up for talking about the fact that every half hour that they came to me, I was like, and it's still raining.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, the hurricanes they could be fun to cover, but man, you're just like, you're repeating yourself. And don't be on the top of a building, by the way. The beauty of it is like on the beach, like ground yourself somewhere, nowhere
Yes.
where you can be blown off. Yeah. That's
Be someplace tied to some. Yeah,
yeah,
well, whatever.
someplace
It's
that right. If
fine.
you get knocked over by the wind, you fall over. You don't fall 8 stories. Um, I left. I eventually took a very significant job for me at a station in Miami. That was where Barry Diller, the I don't know what you'd call him, the media entrepreneur and genius, really. Everything he touched worked. I mean, so he wanted to reinvent local news and not do any of the things that Carlin and I had to do. No live shots from hurricanes. In fact, when we were in Miami and the hurricane came, we went off the air. We turned it over. We simulcat another station, just take over our air. Because they're like, look, this is important, but we can't do this. We don't have the people to do it right. It'll just be stupid. Why do you need to hear from us? They'll do it
Right.
fine. And so
Refreshing.
yeah, it was. And so the idea that Diller wanted was we had to have an opinion. Like we had to, it could be, if it was a political issue of any kind, you could be right wing, you could be left wing, you could have no opinion, but even if you had no opinion, you had to defend it. Like, here's why you shouldn't care about this. That was always my that was the trickiest part when you do a story. And like, here's why this dumb story doesn't matter. I'm gonna tell you. So we were there. I was there I got lucky because, one, the main anchor left. She wanted to move back to New York. She was great, Amy Atkins. And I was sort of the most seasoned other person there. And I started hosting this show at this channel 69, insert your own joke there, in Miami. And it was a station that befit its channel number. It was an absurd place, but it was great also. And, the sound didn't match the audio in the beginning, and everything was really loud. And so we were trying to figure our way along, but we did some great stuff, and I won a couple of awards, which was nice, like just made up awards, but like where like the thing I was doing was recognized. But again, we had to have an opinion, so we got to do things like call Rudy Giuliani a prick, which was easy now, but was
But back then, that was actually not that popular.
Fairly bold in 1999 and 2000 to call Rudy a prick. So
Right.
and then these two amazing stories happened, which was the 2000 election in Florida, in South Florida, where my mom called and said, I think lived in Palm Beach County, and said, I think I voted for Pat Buchanan. You couldn't understand the ballot. And I was like, Mom, you're ridiculous. Of course you could understand the ballot. You're just being, and then like 2 hours later, I called her back. I was like, Mom, we need you to come in. Yeah, we need to interview you because apparently something significant is happening. So, and then all the 4 weeks after the election and the Republican operatives coming down. And it was just this great, great, great story that we had there. And then also this unfortunate kid, Elian Gonzalez, came over, and his mom died, came over from Cuba to South Florida, and they had a boat or rafts, and she died, and the rest of their party, I think, died, and he survived. And his Cuban American family in Miami took him in, and then he became this sort of symbol of the Cuban Americans in the community there in Miami, standing up to Castro and standing up to the efforts that President Clinton had to sort of repair that relationship. And they didn't want him to go home, but his dad was in Cuba and had the means to support him and didn't want him to leave in the first place. His ex-wife took the kid without checking with him.
Right.
So we were like, hey man, I know you hate Cuba, but he got to go home. And we would say that, like, this is crazy. He should go home to his dad. His mom's dead.
Right.
Dad isn't, and his dad loves him, and no one's saying anything bad about his dad, right? His dad wants his boy back. So that put us at odds with the Cuban American community there. And it was great to be able to cover the story without, whereas everybody else was sort of hamstrung by some people say that he should go home. Others just, we were like, of course you should go home. It's his dad. You guys are mad. What are you talking about? And we did a live shot. I got spit on at a live shot when we were anchoring the show outside. It was great. It was just thrilling. The show had a live audience most of the time. And
wow. Okay.
It was really it was thrilling. And so we did all that. And that led me to think when there was, and then the station went off the air because Barry Diller sold it for a gigantic amount of money, even though it was a tremendous failure. And again, he was trying to reinvent local TV completely, and it failed in that regard. And I was determined to move to LA and get a job not in news because I knew that I would never have anything like that again. But that's the tape that allowed me to ultimately get hired by TCM. Like, it took about a year and a half, but and I auditioned for 150 jobs out here in LA. Probably it's probably true. Somewhere, I'd say, between 80 and 150 jobs. When you don't get any of them, you start to lose count. Usually you don't get any of them without even any feedback. A couple times I made second rounds or even a third round once on a show that was going to be the show, remember Blind Date?
Yes.
It was a syndicated dating game show. There was a version of it called, I think, Shipmates.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Blind Date on a cruise ship.
Oh, lovely.
So it was like
And
Blind
gross.
Date where everybody was pretty much guaranteed to have sex, even if they didn't like each other. And
I'm
I
horrified, but okay.
I was one of 3 finalists to host that show. And you had to sign a 7-year contract ahead of time. It wasn't on the air for 7 years, but that was sort of what they put you under. Like, if they get you, if they pick you, they don't want you to hold them up. Right. You gotta sign it ahead of time. Here's what you agree to. If the show's successful, this is what you get. Here are the raises you get. And the money was very attractive to me. It wasn't that much, but at the time it was appealing if I got it. But I don't know whether I went to the last audition or not, but I did at least one audition. I think I did 2. And then I just decided I didn't want to do it. Like, I thought, if I get this job, it'll fail at some point and it will be hard for me to get any
Something
other kind
else.
of job that I want. I don't know whether that's true, but that was definitely my fear. I said no. And then some point later, I got hired by TCM, and I'm pretty sure TCM wouldn't have hired me if I'd been the host of Shipmates.
Yes, and based on what you've described, since I don't remember the show firsthand, but
Oh,
based
no
on
one
what
will
you've
ever.
described,
I saw 4 minutes of one episode. I'm just saying, it was on a cruise ship. Like,
yeah, it's
come on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty sure that it does not radiate that wholesome image that you have at TCM. So there's that. All right, so let me ask the resilience piece though around, I'm going to just go into the 150 applications and certainly right now, where if you get on LinkedIn, you see people who have been looking for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. I've started to see people talk about, do GoFundMe pages because they haven't been able to find something. Because in certain places and spaces, it's a little tough. Talk to me about the resilience to keep getting up and trying again, even when you're not getting feedback, or worse, you're getting horrible feedback that has nothing to do with you. It just is that the company's communications are terrible.
Yeah. Of course. Sometimes you do these auditions and you can just tell they're like, we're not really into your face and the way you talk. We want something else. I always thought that, like, I mean, if they end up hiring a 6'8" black athlete, female, for the job, I was like, okay, they wanted something else. That's great.
Clearly,
Right,
that is
right,
not me.
right, that's not me. But then you'd look at who got these jobs, and I'm like, nope, there's yet another mediocre white guy getting this gig. I'm like, why am I not a mediocre enough white guy? So
Because you weren't mediocre and there was
that's what
something better for you.
Yeah, that's what it was. So there are a couple things that I went far enough, and then I heard that I got eliminated, and they were right. Like, I wouldn't have been right for hosting an entertainment show. And so, first of all, like, all these, doing away with superstitions helped me, like not telling anyone that I was up for something because you're going to jinx it, which is, of course, preposterous. Nobody hires or doesn't hire you because you told your mom. So I started telling everyone everything. I auditioned for this, I'll probably get it. And sort of owning how bad I was at it. I thought I spent a fair amount of time in my head, at least, and making a couple calls to where I was going to sign up for classes at the Groundlings. That's the improv group based out here in LA, that big Saturday Night Live theater. So many great people who you love were Groundlings, Will Ferrell, Maya Rudolph, people like that. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be a performer like that, but it'll help me in auditions where, it's pretty bad. I mean, it's this empty, sterile environment. It's a humiliating experience. my respect for actors. Actually, that whole experience put me in such a great shape to be on TCM because my appreciation for actors went through the roof. Like any stereotype, anytime somebody stereotypes an actor, they're like, he or she only got this job because they're beautiful, handsome. I always think, you know how many great looking people there are in this town? Like they're everywhere. Okay.
Whether
And
they were born that way or
that's right.
surgically changed.
However it is, this is where they come and this is where they live. And like if you're good and you're making it in a movie, man, the 99% chance that you're talented.
All right. I'm gonna stop you right there because one of the things that actually is a cornerstone in the work that I do with Pro Tip Partners is whether I am doing communication media training or whether I am doing sales training. One of the things that I do always with all the workshops is I bake in at least one improv activity
Yeah.
into those to help people get used to operating in the unknown, being able to pivot when they need to. I have an improv partner. Her name is Keisha Zoller, who does a bunch of improv things in her day job when she's not helping me out and joining my workshops. So give me a couple more specific things in terms of what you thought were one super challenging, because I also have to now not scare my customers who are listening about you saying it was terrifying to do the improv. But what do you see as being the benefit of that,
Well,
other than getting you a greater appreciation?
well, you go into these auditions and it's frequently this incredibly sterile environment. I'm sure that, that's not just true in the information in the entertainment world. I mean, we'd go in and, you're expected to, again, they want somebody who can dazzle a room on television or dazzle the screen anyway. And here you're in a room, it's frequently cold, overly air conditioned. LA is secretly kind of chilly a lot. And there'd be like a casting director and an assistant, maybe a guy running a camera, just like a old time, what would now be a phone, but back then they'd have some, fairly cheap video camera to record it. And you would go over the script for it, where you would pretend it was a game show. You two contestants, Carlin and Ben, you're ready to play the game. Now, Carlin, you'll get the answer the first three questions. If you miss those questions, Ben will get a chance to steal any one of the three for 2 points. But if he gets it wrong, that 2 points goes back to you, and you'll control the next question. Although Ben can use one of his challenges. You're like, whoa.
Oh my God.
Right. By the way, I'm barely exaggerating. Like it was always these endless rules. And they're on cue cards because there's impossible to memorize, or maybe it was, but I didn't do it. And but like they put them on cue cards for you and you're like, you're confused. And then Carlin will get to challenge, and then they don't laugh at anything. You think you're funny, you're saying something clever and it's depressing.
Mhm.
Is really what it is. It's definitely depressing. And so, I just, I thought I should take this groundlings course to get myself comfortable to however things may go, that I'm not going to be with someone who's thrilled to see me. They don't know who I am. They've never heard of me. They don't know anything about me. Most of them, even when they do, they don't care. They're seeing all these other people. You sit in a room where you see some of the other candidates sometimes, and you can hear them perform through the walls. Like it can get in your head. And so the best thing that I thought by the way, I didn't do it, but I know that was another mistake. I should have done it. Well, first of all, I should have done it because who knows? I maybe could have done that too. But could have there could have been something there. But you got to get yourself, comfortable in what are unquestionably uncomfortable situations, because no one's going to see your best. If you're uncomfortable, no one's been their best while really uncomfortable, right? Now you can be your best while anxious, right? Every time I go on stage, no matter how many times I've done it, I get a little buzz of anxiety. If it's a bigger person that I'm maybe interviewing or introducing or doing it, then it's a little bigger. If it's something I haven't done a number of times, it's bigger. But I'm always nervous walking out there. But that can fuel you.
Yes.
I'm confident also, but you get that. So anyway, that's really the word that would give you is that you learn to do improv and you get confident. You get confident that even if you say something and it fails, you're moving the situation along, right? And you know that doesn't matter if I failed that one because I have another opportunity to get these people back on my side in somewhere between 8 and 30 seconds, so you're always listening for that way to get in, and it doesn't have to be with a joke either. And you learn it can be sort of with anything. It can be with any kind of connection about something they say. But if you're listening, which is why so many actors are good at improv, because to be a good actor, you have to listen. You really have to pay attention to what's happening, what the other person is saying, and that forms a connection, and it's super valuable. And there's no question in my mind that any sort of improv would help, could help anybody in any type of business situation, as long as they don't like presume that they're definitely funny. That's the one
Yes.
risk in sending people down this road, is it doesn't mean that you're hilarious.
Correct. And that's actually how we build a class is we're not here to teach you how to be funny. We're here to teach you how to listen, how to pivot, and how to be okay in really unknown situations. And my bottom line rule on being funny, or excuse me, trying to be funny or tell jokes, is always, if no one other than a blood relative has told you you're funny, you're not funny, so don't
That's right.
try.
Yeah. And it's
Right.
okay. It's okay not to be, but not everybody gets to be fun. It's all right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So one of your gifts, Ben, is being able to get people to open up when you're interviewing. You get people to want to share. You get them to want to talk a little bit more. And you talked about building relationships, when you're on screen or camera or anything else with whoever is viewing at home. I would argue the same is true for the people, salespeople, business people in general. They want to create those connections and get people to open up, certainly so that they can, make a better sale. Talk to me about, and one of your interviews recently from CBS Sunday Morning was with Kathy Bates, and that went super viral because you showed her thank you speech, where she thanked her mom, and she never believed that she had, and she had carried that around for a really long time. And you just went, yes, you did. We have the tape. Here you go. Talk to me about
Well,
getting people to open up and how you do that.
well, so I don't really know, but I have thought about it because I recognize that I've gotten better at it. So something must be happening. Um, One is to prepare, which is really obviously like that moment with Kathy Bates where she says, I just think my mom, because her mom, she won an Oscar, and her mom said, I don't know why people are making such a fuss. It's not like you cured cancer. And I
Mhm.
laughed at first. And then what's not in the piece, because I took too long to ask it, I stopped and I was like, I'm laughing, but that's really quite hurtful. You're not a doctor, you're an actress, right?
Right.
And so this is, you've done as well as you could in the thing you'd chosen to do, which moves people, right? This
Mhm.
was, she won the Oscar for Misery. And then she said, I took it too long to say that, so we couldn't use it. And by the way, brevity, contrary to this interview, is another thing that helps. When you can say something in 8 words instead of 18, choose 8.
Mhm.
And so she said, I'd never, I just think she was mad because I didn't thank her on Oscar night. Now, the interview was in the afternoon. So it wasn't the night before. It was that morning when I'd watched her Oscar acceptance speech, which you can now watch almost everything there on YouTube. It was a time, for a long time, the Academy didn't make those things available, but they are available now.
Mhm.
So I was 99.8% sure that she had thanked her mom. I remembered it because then she ended the speech by saying, and to my father, I hope you're watching from somewhere. Thank you. She cried a little bit. Yes, thanks to my mom and to my dad, who's, wherever he is and watching this. I hope he's proud of something. So, and Daniel Day-Lewis also gave the Oscar away. And I was like, that wasn't the Golden Globes. That was the Oscars. Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't go to the Golden Globes.
Right.
And so I looked over at our producer, like, am I out of my mind? She said, you did thank her. And then she rather, I want to say harshly, but it's not right, because we had a really great relationship. It was honest. She at one point castigated me for another note here, for looking down at my notes for too long while she was talking, which I tried never, ever to do. But I'd written, I fill up pages with notes, and I sometimes can't find what I'm looking for. And she switched topics, and I wanted to remind myself to go back to the thing she had talked about. So I looked down. I was listening still, but she said, "Are you listening?" And I was like,
Ooh.
I am. And I repeated what she said. It was because she liked the conversation. She wouldn't have said it if she didn't care. Like, that's the
Mhm.
truth. She was like into it, and was hoping that we were connecting. And I said, yeah, I'm sorry. You said something. And I was trying to find a note, but I can't find it. I wrote 800 words on this page, and I can't find what I'm looking for. And then we continued. And so then when I said, you thanked your mom, she said, no, I didn't. Look at the video. And I wasn't going to argue with her. Right. But I
Right.
look at our producer, and then 8 minutes later, Gabriel Falcon, CBS producer, when we stopped a tape to fix a camera thing, she comes around, he goes, show her this. And he'd queued it up. And I played it for her. And the reaction is there in the piece of all, she looks like Kevin in Home Alone. She's like
Yeah.
she's moved. And this burden was released from her. And then, if what brief skill I have, whatever skill I have, was enough to shut up then and let that, I waited what seemed like an eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And I said something like, what's going on? Like sometimes the best question is not, are you surprised to see that? Which kind of
Right.
takes
It's
you out of the
just
moment, but like,
talk to me about it.
yeah, I go, why? I think I said, why is this moving you so? Right. And, and she took another 10 or 15 seconds. So sometimes you let the silence happen because something was happening. And that's certainly true live. You can always tell with the audience. If you're in front of an audience, you can tell the difference between uncomfortable silence and riveted silence, or at least I think I can. And, no, you definitely can, and you get used to it. And if it's riveted silence, don't ruin it. So that's a connection you have to make with the person you're talking to, whether you like them or not. As it happens, I like all these people. And Kathy Bates, it's amazing. We've already done something else with her. And
Nice.
so, you want to connect with these people, and the only way you connect with them is by respecting them. And that means listening to them. And, some of these people are on, and I want to have a reputation that they think, oh, this interview might be different, and he's not going to embarrass me. I always want, like, I'm in a chair here, but like this chair has wheels, but I want them to do this interview and for them to be like a little uneasy. Like imagine this chair doesn't have wheels and it's an old fashioned like dinner chair and it's off the ground. I want this sort of, I think of it like they're slightly leaning back in the chair. So there's some risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't, the chair can't fall over. Like you can't embarrass them or hurt them. So you want it to be a little uneasy because they don't quite know where the conversation would go, but in a good way. Like you're on a first date and you like the person, So, and that's where they reveal something. And I don't mean reveal something like I had an affair with Marilyn Monroe or, I once killed a drifter, I mean they reveal something just about themselves. And it may even be the way they react to it. It may even be that they're thoughtful about their answer and we don't even care what they say, just the manner in which they answer it. But they say something which lets the audience see a little piece of them to where the audience leaves, whether it's on television or live, and thinks, I feel like I know Ryan Reynolds, Margot Robbie, Michael Douglas. Something happened here where I feel like I know a piece of them, which is, I think, really basically all you can hope for. If they can repeat a line they said, that's great, but mostly you just want them to feel like they saw something genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from listening and paying attention and being prepared. And the preparation part is for you, meaning me in this case.
Right.
So I'm prepared because then I know basically wherever they go, I can get there. I mean, I frequently write out all these things. I'm talking about it most of the time. We cover 22% of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, but I know it. And if she says, Kathy Bates starts talking about Dolores Claiborne, I'll be able to talk about Dolores Claiborne, even though we didn't. That's
right.
Yeah.
Fine movie, by the way. I like that a lot.
Totally a good movie. Yeah.
So folks, if you haven't seen it, you should go check that out. And I'm sure it's on like Netflix or something. It's old.
You can find it.
Yeah, for sure. All right. We're going to take a break for a quick second. And when we come back, we'll get a little bit more into Ben as a mentor and then also see if Ben had one other than just trying to not be a failure, as he mentioned earlier. But stay with us. We'll be right back.
Think you're a great sales leader just because you were a top seller? Think again. At ProTip Partners, we turn good managers into great leaders. Our unique hands-on workshops combine improvisation techniques with core sales leadership fundamentals, making you more agile in managing your team. With tailored scenarios for your industry, our engaging veteran facilitators ensure you're ready to set visions that will have your team running through walls for you. Because remember, 57% of people say they've left a job because of their managers, not their companies. Ready to be a leader your team will break barriers for? Call 3014-PRO-TIP or visit protippartners.com. Let's surpass those revenue goals together.
All right, welcome back. One of the things I want to make sure that we get into, and it's going to sound a little fangirly, so please just excuse that for the moment because I don't do that quite often, or I don't do it that often. But one of the things when we opened, I talked about the fact that Ben was really instrumental in helping me get comfortable in front of a camera. So for those just who didn't work at Channel 5 in Charleston back in the 90s, I woke up every morning at 9 a.m., was at the station by 9:30, and wanted to see whatever story Ben was covering because I worked the night shift and as a PA, production assistant, and I basically, or actually a reporter trainee, but functioned like production assistant. And I followed Ben around. I went on all his stories, watched him do all the interviews, and eventually, after a certain period of time, Ben worked with me on doing my own stand-ups. Stand-ups are when you're standing out in the field, you've got your little mic, you're talking about whatever is happening, or you're driving something home at the end. And he talked about everything from my delivery skill, how to stand, how to position, even how to break or hold eye contact. And then as he would go into interviews, and we covered some really crazy stories that we might get into, we'll see. But really making sure that the quality of questions and were such that they could open up the interview subject and that they were smart and led the conversation somewhere. So first and foremost, Ben, when you looked at me and others and you would give them feedback and the like, did you do that? Like, I'm going to mentor this person and help her get her shot on TV? Or was it just, she's around, she's tagging around, like, I can tell her something.
It was it was option 3. I certainly didn't seek out to be a mentor, but I there aren't that many things that I'm good at, and sort of knew right away when I did my first piece, like, I'm gonna be okay at this. Like I'll meet a certain threshold, definitely. I know I have the cadence down, like how to tell a story, how to track a story, how to make my voice sound, like little things like that just were instinctive, came from my brother, watching him. A lot of that stuff was given to me by my brother. He used to say, look, all that matters is your first line, your last line, and your stand up. The other stuff is just what gets you there. Right. It's the story and you have to be truthful. Right. But like, you don't have to worry about how that's written. You can just you can do that fairly boilerplate-ish unless something strikes you. But you want to connect with the audience, and one way to connect with the audience is with a stand-up, right? So and then the pausing and breaking is because he used to explain to me, like, the people eating a hungry man dinner and they're listening to you talk and talk and talk, and if you stop talking and they're looking down and eating, you stop talking, they're going to look up like, why'd that guy stop talking? And we had an anchor there in Charleston, a guy named Bill Sharp, who on one level, it's easy sort of to make fun of his over-the-top style, but I think if we did, we were missing the point. Like, he was really good at it. And he used to break eye contact all the time. He stole that from Bill Curtis, who's on as the anchor man.
A&E.
And it was on A&E, but he was an anchor man in Chicago for a long time, and he's great. And great voice. He's the voice of Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR. And he's a great broadcaster, and he used to do that. After Bill told me, I watched some Bill Curtis after Bill Sharp told me that he stole from Bill Curtis, and I'm like, oh yeah, you did, right? But good for Bill, good for both Bills. So, like, it's an unnatural thing being a reporter and telling people a story in this way. I'm still sort of doing it at TCM. It's a different kind of thing. It's like a 2.5 minute stand up
right
before every movie, but I always think of it as, when we're writing them, when I'm writing it, I get them written, but then I massively rewrite them. So that's the most time by far that I spend on this job, is working on the scripts that then exist for 2 minutes and vanish into the ether. And so even though I never say, hi, I'm Ben Mankiewicz, oh my God, I got an amazing story about Casablanca to tell you. Like, that's what sort of is in my head. Like, that's how it begins. Well, you think you know this about Casablanca? Hold on. You're not going to believe this, but. And then you go, like, so it's, and obviously you have a teleprompter, but you want it to seem like you don't, that just takes time to develop. that skill. So no, I didn't set out to be a mentor. You were there and you were inquisitive and you were respectful. And, you know, I mean, I would have helped you even if you weren't respectful, but I wouldn't have liked it.
I mean, I feel like no, but okay.
Well, I mean, I would have like still, if you'd asked me a question, but you'd have been like about talking about all the time about how great you are at this or what I was doing wrong or the or bad mouthing other people, you know, like, I mean, I probably still would have given you advice on stuff that you asked about, but I would have thought, you know, no one's going to hire her because she's, you know, unpleasant to be around, you know, like, so yeah, but I mean, that's key is you may, you know, if somebody asks for help and they're solicitous, then I don't know why anybody wouldn't help them, you know?
So
but I wasn't a
what
very
would
good
be-
interviewer back then. I mean, I was better than, you know, I took too long. So there was too much tape to go through. That's the nature of local news versus what I do now. You know, I mean, most people would, you know, think that you want to get that. And if you talk to the cop for a minute and a half and get 3 sound bites, you're gone. Like you got, but I always bantered for a while. But I think obviously that's what had some people trust me. There were things that pay off in a different
Yes.
way. But I had a tendency, why I was not a great reporter, news reporter, is that I did have a tendency to believe everything anybody told me, even when they were obviously not telling the truth. Like in hindsight, I'd be like, because they seemed sincere if they were good at it. I remember the guy at the Citadel, you know, their spokesman, Terry,
Oh
whatever.
yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, that guy, and he would just say stuff, and I'd be, oh, okay, I got it. And then later you're like, wait, that wasn't this. You're not being honest. Like your whole mission here is to protect the Citadel in a thing that you can't succeed in. Like, just
Right.
be honest, man. Just be honest. Like, yeah, we didn't let girls in, and that was a mistake. Now we're going to have to do it. Like, you know, like that's just
And we
great.
don't like it, and we're going to have to do it,
Right. We
right?
don't like
Like
it. We're going to have to do it, but we'll learn to like it. And then, you know, I mean, a smart person would have said, look, in 5 years, it'll be standard and we'll be better for it. You know,
right.
this
Right.
this part's going to be tricky for some people, but in 5 years, it's going to be fine. It'll be better.
Yes. Yes.
So, but I did have a tendency to believe people. So I'm grateful to not have to do that anymore. To sort of, I don't want to challenge anybody. And the interviews with actors or actresses that have gone wrong, and there's really only been 1 or 2. It's just because the person didn't trust me and they acted as if, you know, I was going to say, you know, you say you didn't threaten to kill Sally Field over this, but we have a copy of your email. You know, I mean, like I always want to say to him, I'm not Mike Wallace. I don't have a reveal coming.
Right.
You know, like
Right.
the mission here is to get you a couple of standing ovations because people feel connected to you, not because we're tricking them. You know.
Mhm.
So anyway, so you got to listen, and whatever these things are, you got to listen. And so I like mentoring. I like doing it now. I mean, I've offered to help a lot of people who haven't taken it, but I would definitely do it.
Oh, well, they're stupid. They should totally take it. Because I mean, because it creates such a great pathway for, and even though I didn't stay in news, after a number
Neither
of
did I.
years,
Yeah.
well, neither did you. But I didn't stay in news, but what I'm doing now is so much better for me, and I enjoy it so much more. But at the same time, I still go back to all of Ben's lessons on delivery and creating relationships and asking good questions and making sure that when you go into something that you aren't trying to catch or snag people, because in the training side of things, you don't snag or catch people. You want to bring out the best in them, and make sure that they are in fact
Yeah.
delivering their best and doing their best.
So, you know, my father, when he finished politics and he got to be 60 years old, was finished at NPR, he finally got a job that earned him a little bit of money for the first time in his life, right? First time he wasn't like on a government salary or, you know, working on a campaign. And you know, you're just a Senate aide in 1965, you know, you're not getting rich. And so he, you know, and you write books about Castro and Nixon again, you know, we can get rich doing that either. Maybe now. But anyway, he, so when he went into PR, which he did for the last really 30 years of his life, he pretty much stayed working at least in some capacity until he was 90 when he died. And, but he was certainly working pretty regularly through 84, 85. But he would always tell people, at least in crisis management, people would hire him, governments would hire him, filmmakers would hire him. You know, anybody who needed to navigate a tricky world of public relations would hire him. And sometimes those people needed public relations help, as I'm sure you've been exposed to, because they have an immediate problem, usually a problem that they have caused. Right. And his advice, which applied to pretty much everyone, even if you weren't going through a crisis, was to tell the truth, tell it all, tell it first.
Yes.
And obviously, by tell it all, it means tell it all that's related to this, and so
And it's necessary.
it's necessary. That's right. I mean,
Right.
you don't have to give the history of your company, and to some extent, I would tell people that's what I want. I would love it if people I interviewed were thinking that was tell the truth, tell it all, tell it first. I don't mean all your life, but I mean tell it all about the thing you're talking about. Like
Yes.
the thing you're talking about, the thing that drove you crazy about your mother, right? Or the thing that made you think you were going to be a failure, or the thing that made you a success. Tell us all of it, right? And included in that might be that, secretly I'm really affable and everybody likes me, but I'm ruthless, right? If somebody says that, you're like, that's really interesting, right? And I don't think they're going to pay a price for that. And then also tell it first. You're the first person. I'm going to say Ryan Reynolds, who never said anything like that, but might be ruthless, right? Who's this incredibly charming dude, but he's when I was interviewing him, I'm like, oh, tell me something, that
Give me the dirt.
right. I mean, I didn't ask it like that because that'll never get you there. But I'm thinking and it's not. But I also don't want to think of it as dirt. I just want to think of it as like interesting, right?
Yeah. Juicy.
Unknown, captivating, relevant, and something that people can relate to, right? I mean, even if it's like, yeah, it was, I read, whatever somebody's playing a real figure and they're like, I've read, playing John. If I talking to Paul Giamatti about John Adams, if he'd said, I've read 6 John Adams biographies, 6. I wanted to know everything. And another actor might be like, I'm not trying to be him. I'm playing him. It's different. It's my interpretation of him. So all that stuff is interesting to me. And that's where tell it all. I tell the truth, tell it all, tell it first. But the truth matters. It has to be a truth. Otherwise then I'm engaging in some, I don't like it when I feel like I'm being PR'd, even if no person is doing it, even if it's just the nature of the story where you're like, this feels oddly promotional as opposed to
a good conversation.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, we are coming up to the end of our time, and I always close out with the question, what didn't I ask you and should have? So, Ben, what didn't I ask you, but probably should have? Or you wish that I had?
I mean, it's a little bit, and I guess I'm just talking about it a little bit anyway, but I mean, the nature of what to do when people are lying to you is interesting, right? And what's your responsibility? It's obviously different when Carlin and I were reporters. We're supposed to get at the truth, right? I mean, a lot of, it's been misrepresented to you're supposed to tell both sides, but that's nonsense. There's no journalism school that really tells you to tell both sides. First of all, there are more than 2 sides, and sometimes those sides are wrong or they're lying, right? So the object should always be some truth, right? So, and it's tricky because you want to believe people. You want to like people and you want people to like you, right? So that's what we had a colleague, Carl and I were there, named John Mills.
Oh, yeah.
And John and I were not really friends. We weren't enemies in any way, but we never meaningfully connected over anything. But I always admired that guy. He didn't care how people felt about him.
Right.
And I thought he was an excellent reporter.
Yes.
He would just, he didn't care if they were like, you're being irritating. He'd be like, I don't care. Right.
He was just about get after it, go get it.
Yeah. He had that. He had real tenacity as a reporter. He really did. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you could have asked me, but didn't. You asked a lot. So nothing immediately springs to mind. I did think we were going to talk about my friend on death row.
We can, and I want to be mindful of your time, but if you want to talk about your friend on death row, because I did say, hey, we can talk about some of the crazy stories. So
sometimes you'd get into an interview where people are lying, and one of the other things that you'd mentioned that you want to talk about. So we had Charleston County's, I was an education reporter for first couple of years that I was on a beat in Charleston, which sounds boring, but in Charleston was not boring. It was
not boring.
It was the most political thing that we could cover.
Yes.
Right. And guy, sort of the head of the school board, was this sort of, decent, forward thinking guy named Robert New, who I liked. And I would cultivate him as a source much better now. I was intimidated by him, but I think he would have just, you could have called him at 10:30 at night and he would have put you on the right track for things. And then there was this longtime conservative on the board, a guy named John Graham Altman, who was an old time, like out of the movies Southerner and a bigot. And
In a very big way.
yeah, but here's the thing, life's complicated. He was fun to talk to. He was an
He
affable
was.
guy. He was funny. He had a sense of humor, which is rare for bigots. He used to call me his favorite Yankee Jew.
Did he really? I missed that.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't say like, "Hey, it's the Yankee," but I mean, almost every time, once he'd be like, I like you, Mankiewicz. You're my favorite Yankee Jew." So that kind of thing came out of his mouth. But every year, because the Charleston County School District, like every other sane sort of school district in the country, sort of recognizes February as Black History Month. I don't think I need to tell people why that is, why it became necessary.
But he had a different idea.
That's right. We had it became necessary because we didn't teach any Black history. So they set aside a whole month for it. Obviously, it'd be better if it were just normally incorporated into the school year, but the tendency, and I guess probably a tendency now, would be not to do that, right? Because if you cover the civil rights movement, you might have to recognize that there were racial problems in America, right? And we can't do that now.
But we could have covered it in White History Month.
That's right. That's right. It could have covered it in White History Month. So that was John Graham Altman's proposal every year, is that March, if April is Black History Month, then March should be White History, and we had a guy on staff at the station, a folksy reporter on station who agreed with all that stuff too.
I don't remember that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Well, later.
Yeah. But so then like how you deal with that guy, how you talk to him, because of course he knew it wasn't going to pass. He was grandstanding, and we covered it like it was real. As opposed to if I'd been in Miami, I'd be like, here's the part where this grandstanding racist tries to claim that we should have a White History Month after Black History Month because that's the only way to make this fair. But we're not going to cover it because you're just posing and you want attention. So I'm not even going to say the racist name. Like that's how we would have covered it in Miami. That would have been fun, right?
Yes.
I wouldn't have thrown racist around that much, but I would have said bigot, probably a small-minded little, So I enjoyed that, but that comes up in life, what to do with those people. And then we covered a story of a tragedy that happened on a weekend. I was the weekend reporter at the time, still working weekends. Maybe I was anchoring. I don't know. But this guy named James Reed, he had like 5 days left on a Army prison sentence for punching a superior officer, if memory serves me. And, he's serving fill in the blank, not even that long, less than 2 years, I think, at a pretty minimum security prison. And they transferred him to another prison. And the way they did that, when you only had a little time left and he wasn't considered dangerous, they just put you on a bus and like, here's this. And we're putting you on a bus Wednesday. By Friday at 6 p.m., you have to report to the prison we're sending you to in Kentucky or wherever the hell it was. Anyway, James got off the bus, even though he had like 2 weeks or something left to serve, and went to see his, I always want to say it was a common law wife, but I don't know, his girlfriend, right? And he went to see her, and she wasn't there. She was in this remote part of a little bit outside of Charleston County called Adams Run, I think. And her parents were there, and he killed them. And obviously it was a terrible story and destroyed this loving, kind of big and close family. And, the parents were like, probably younger than I am now, and part of it was because they were standing up. They were like, we're not telling you where our daughter is because you're a violent person. Right. So I covered the story. And then later I got an invitation to meet the guy accused of doing it. His name, I think, was James Reed. And I went and saw James. And in prison, James is an obviously mentally ill, but kind person. Like James is a decent person. I'm not even sure he knew he'd done it in the sense that you and I would know, right? Or most people listening would know. And I talked to him. We did a couple stories on it, and it was definitely good TV. And and then eventually I covered, as I became the courts reporter, and I covered his trial, or maybe it was just his sentencing phase. I don't really remember. No, it was his trial.
It was his trial.
James defended himself. It's another sign.
Right.
Again, like, how do we let this happen? He's obviously not mentally stable.
Well.
Right.
Right.
And the public defender guy named Ashley Pennington was there with him, but James is like cross-examining witnesses. And I mean, I always remember this because James had glasses, and so the witness came out and said, look, I saw in the morning, that a guy came up in a car and he identified that person as James, and then he goes, then I, kept walking my dogs, but he was right outside the house. And then I heard, 30 minutes later, the two people have been killed there. And then James cross-examines him, and James has his glasses on. He's like touching his glasses, and he goes, Mr. Smith, was the person you saw in that car wearing glasses? And the guy goes, no, James, you weren't wearing your glasses. And I was like, oh, Jesus, right? And he's like, no further questions. Yeah.
Why was he allowed to do this himself?
And then he was sentenced to death, and he's been executed. And we did another set of stories about him. I think Lee Moody did when he was in, we did more stories in death row. And he was like, I was sort of talking about how his case had been mishandled.
Since he tried it himself.
Huh?
I said, since he tried it himself.
Yeah, since he tried himself. And I don't know the public defender could have kept him off death row. But again, it was just sort of this, to me, this sign of like, man, we're not getting anywhere by, I mean, I didn't need to be convinced that the death penalty was wrong, but there was a clear example. I mean, again, it's a guy, I get it. I get why you don't want to let him out. I'm for that. I don't want him out of prison. But anyway, it was just a story sort of, that's, it's both amusing and tragic and sad, and a sign of how our sort of the best justice system in the world can be, and I don't really know all the other systems, but I'm sure that there are improvements we could make.
Yeah. And as our former news director, Don Feldman, would have said, but that was good television,
Definitely
which
good.
was unfortunate.
Do you know the one real quick story about like sort of also standing up? So I had a good relationship with Don. Don hired me and as the morning show producer. And then within, I think 6 weeks I was on the air.
Yeah. He loved you.
Yeah, we had a nice relationship. So Don went to prison for embezzling money. But he embezzled money, just for the record, from a very wealthy insurance company. So
not that makes it okay. I don't want people thinking we're advocating.
But I mean, he didn't take it from a pension fund or,
he didn't Bernie Madoff anybody.
He got cut. It was all sort of everything that motivated Don was this desire to be liked and connect with people. And so he sort of created this life that didn't exist by charging for satellite
all kinds
time.
Of things.
Yes. But mostly satellite time is how he got the bulk of the money. And then there'd be he just billed them for it. So anyway, because we had a satellite truck. Anyway, but I like Don a lot, and he's out. He went to prison. He served his time, and plenty of people who do more don't serve at all. So anyway, but he was a criminal, no question. And but anyway, so he when I was the education reporter, he called me before I came in. I'm sure I was running late, but he called me before I came in and said, don't come into the meeting. Don't come into the station. Go right to somewhere west of the Ashley, because there was a race riot on a school bus. And it's a big story. And Don, we now know, is very well sourced in the schools, right? So I go, and he doesn't have much information, just on a school bus this morning, a race riot. Obviously, this is going to be our lead story at 6:30. It's such a TV story. When you said it's good TV, this is going to be it. Anyway, somehow through luck, I called Don back. We talked to some people, and I found the bus driver at let's say 10:45 or 11 o'clock in the morning. Been driving around since 9 or whatever. And I say, hey, I understand there was can we talk about what happened on the bus? And he's like, sure. And I'm like, I understand there was a race riot on the bus. Can you tell me what happened? He goes, race riot? He goes, I drive first graders or second graders.
No.
Right. And I'm like, he goes, a black kid and a white kid definitely got into a fight on the bus. And because they're kids and there was a fight on the bus, the other kids were all like yelling and cheering, and I had to stop the bus. I'm not paraphrasing now, I remember, but I had to pull over and I had to break it up. And one of the kids was white and one was black, but I goes, I don't think they're friends, he said. I remember that part. He goes, they're friends. Like, it's something happened and they started hitting each other, but they got off the bus together. Like they had,
they had
they
made
beat each other up, and then they made it up. And I don't know what the school, I called anybody. I don't even think he called the police, or if he did call the police, like they'd wave them off, like they got into a fight, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. And everybody went about their business. There was no police report. So I said to Don, I go, so there's no story here. He goes, we've teased it already. It's like out on the radio. We got to run it. I go, there's no story here. He's like, well, then just say there wasn't a story, but we've teased it. Like, and I'm like, Don. And so we argued. I enlisted the help of Carolyn Murray, who was an anchor there, who carried some weight with him as well. And he was like, all right, fine, we'll pull the promos. And I was like, I thought, oh, this is a good day. This is a rare good day where justice has been done, because we're not covering the fight between the 7-year-old boys as a race riot.
I just can't. I just
Really great.
yet a reason, one reason, I don't know which, on why neither of us do that anymore.
That's right. No, that's exactly why. Because I got news for you. If you don't have a news director who listens to reporters the way Don did, and Don did, I really like Don. He's a good dude, and he's a good embezzler. And he, yeah, like you're just going to lose that argument. You're just going to lose it. And the promos are running. The promos are good. And that's what's gonna last.
And on that note, what a great place to end. No, but let's recap some of the things that Ben talked about. Really, again, the importance of building trust, right? So just so that you can have a better conversation, you can have a better opportunity to connect and build the relationship, but also get more people to listen. And part of that is actually listening, doing your homework, doing the preparation. Ben also talked about everybody should at some point try some improv to get used to dealing in the unknown, get used to moving at the last minute or changing what you have to do based on the circumstances in front of you, even if it is changing a story from a race riot to 2 7-year-olds fighting on the bus. Which brings us to the most important point on telling the truth, telling it all, and telling it first.
Yeah.
Right. Which is the thing. So making sure that your story is out there. But again, Ben, I will say it has been such a pleasure to, one, reconnect, to have my role model on here, even though you shucks it away, and I'm very well aware you have no idea how much you've impacted my own career. But I want to say thank you, and also remind everyone to tune in to all things TCM. You can see Ben on TCM, and then share, when does your podcast
So we have
go
a couple
live?
podcasts. We have one currently airing, released every Tuesday. We've aired the first 2 of 10 episodes, called Talking Pictures. It is me in conversation with filmmakers, actors, filmmakers, talking about why movies matter to them, why movies matter to all of us. Like it's their movie. It's a movie memories podcast. It's good. It's fun. Jason Reitman comes out tomorrow, which I'm sure this won't be tomorrow then, but you can find the Jason Reitman one. We also have already had Bill Murray, and I guess, did we do Carol Burnett second? No, we did Bridget Everett second, but Carol Burnett's coming up later in the year, Margot Robbie later in the year, Henry Winkler, like Grace, and Jason Reitman was a really great conversation, the director, Jason Reitman. And then our other podcast is called The Plot Thickens. That's more a narrative podcast, each season taking you through a specific time or person in the history of classic Hollywood. And it's really good. And the 5th season just finished earlier this year. It's on John Ford, all available wherever podcasts are sold. And and we have a season 6. That John Ford one's really good, and season 6 is already in development. So we'll be out with that eventually.
Well, and so if they want to catch, and tell me again, because I didn't write it down fast enough, who you have that airs tomorrow.
Jason Reitman.
Jason Reitman will be then
November
also
26th. That's becomes available. And Bridget Everett was the week before, and we opened the year with Bill Murray, which was really a great experience for me. And every Tuesday, those Talking Pictures podcasts drop. And as I said, Carol Burnett coming up later. Margot Robbie was unbelievable. I didn't expect that to be great like it was. And there's an example of like, oh, she's just pretty. No, you're missing the whole.
Oh no, super
no, I mean,
substantive.
But I mean, I just mean nobody serious says that.
No.
I mean,
I get it.
Yeah. She's exceptional, and she was a soap opera star in Australia at like 17 or 18, and came over here. And just real quick, one little fun thing she wrote after She didn't feel she'd done anything worthy until I don't remember the titles of any movies until the ice skating movie where she played I, Tanya.
Tanya.
Until she played Tanya Harding in I, Tanya, which was nominated for an Oscar. But when she finished that, she was like, okay, I have the cred now. Even though she'd been in a Scorsese movie, right? She'd already done Wolf of Wall Street. And she so she wrote Quentin Tarantino a letter saying, look, I admire you and I've done this and I think I'm good enough to be in one of your movies and I'd like to be in one of your movies. And she was in Hollywood as Sharon Tate. It was great. I just mean, but that's like, so there's massive initiative being taken at the point where you feel like you have the clout to make somebody listen. You could argue Quentin Tarantino would have paid attention to Margot Robbie if she hadn't sent the email, but I bet he paid more attention that she'd sent him
That she did.
By the way, it wasn't an email. Of course not. It was a handwritten letter.
Of course. And for the record, that's how I got my first job after television. I found 5 companies I wanted to work for, sent them a letter and said, here's why you should hire me. And one of them did. So
you don't
I'm a big
need
fan.
all 5. You need to go 1 for 5.
That's right.
That's right.
That's all that matters. Ben Mankiewicz, thanks so much. You've made my day.
Thanks, Carl. It was lovely to reconnect with you and talk to you.
Did you hear something you liked? Tell me about it at Carlin RTG Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. Thanks for joining.